Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you hear my voice? Let me know if you can hear me. Okay. Alright, konbanwa. So, this is Junichiro Horikawa, and this is the weekly tutorial live for Houdini, which is called as Houdini Algorithmic Live. This is the 107th episode for this series of tutorial live stream, and the topic that I would like to share with you today is to create some dissolve effect geometrically procedurally using Houdini. Because it is procedural, you can just go back and forth by changing the time frame. It's not based on the solver, it's more of a geometric calculations. You could also change several parameters, like changing the size of the grid-based particle. I'm dividing the geometry into grid like this to dissolve. You could also change how many frames to use for the dissolve. More frames you have more gradient in terms of the dissolve. Less frame you have, you see less particles being blown away at the same time. You could also change the offset for the end and start. You could also change the angle when it dissolves. By increasing this angle, I'm rotating these particles or grid like this. But if I set it to 0, we'll just stay it as it is, like that. No rotation. And I also have this up parameter in order to lift up those particles when it disappears or dissolves. But if I make it to 0, it stays at its position and just scales down, which makes it more of a sci-fi like dissolve, which could be also interesting. So that's what I would like to share today. How I did this, which is not that hard to do, it's pretty simple, so I hope you enjoy it. Okay, now first thing first, as you can see, I'm using some cool 3D scan model, which is free to download, which is a Creative Commons by 4.0 license, so you can share freely, with, even for commercial usage. I'll first of all show you where you can download this kind of models, which is shared by Kyushu University, which is a university in Japan, on the south area of Japan. Well, this is written in Japanese, but if you see it in English, it says more than 1,400 realistic 3D digital biological specimens model has been released freely by a research lab, I think. And you can download it from I guess this one, from a list, the page of this sketch fav page. And each, there is like more than 1,000 models for specimens, like you can see here. And each one of them you can download for free, and it's free to use. The license is this one, Attribution 4.0 International CC by 4.0. You can copy and distribute the material in any medium and format, and you can also remix, transform, and build upon the material for any purpose, even commercially. That's big. So this is pretty cool. I think you'll enjoy this a lot, I believe. So what I did is to download one of the model from here, which was a Japanese crayfish somewhere. I cannot find it anywhere. But if you go here, to one of the page, this is a dragonfly, and there is a download link here. You can download a bunch of models, which is limited to GLTF, USDZ, or GLB. In my case, I have downloaded GLB.glb, which has the 4K texture. Okay, which will be the biggest size of all. And I have and you can actually import this GLB file inside Houdini. So let's try from that, shall we? Okay, I'm going to create the new file for Houdini to do it from scratch, starting from import the GLB file and tell you how to use it. Alright. Okay, so first thing first, I am going to save this to today's folder. Okay, this one here. What was it called? Sci-Fi Resolve. Alright. Now, I'm just going to import the crayfish file that I have downloaded in my folder, but you can just choose your own GLB file of your choice. And first of all, I'm going to make the background dark, create a geometry. Oh, by the way, for people who are curious where you can download the file, I'm gonna just paste the link to the chat. Alright, now let's do this. In order to import the GLB, what I'm going to use is the file menu to import the GLTF scene. GLB is the binary version of GLTF, which includes the texture as well. Okay, so let's try to import that, which is in my folder here. Alright, then import. This will import the crayfish. Yes. Now, and there's supposed to be a crayfish model, a GLB model right here, imported in your OBJ network. Now, hide this and let's import this model inside the OBJ, I mean the GO1 network, by using object merge. And what I'm going to do is to select this one here. Now this doesn't really import the model. You have to look into the children by using star like this. This will import everything, but it is also importing some unnecessary geometry, so I'm just going to delete that. Double click, delete. Alright. And there's actually another null geometry inside a glove, which I don't really need. This one, so I'm also going to select this and also delete this one. Oops, This is hard to select. Okay. Alright. Nope, it's not deleting. Well, anyway. Okay, I'm just gonna keep it as it is. Now, the there are some issue with the rotation here, so let's also fix that semi-automatically somehow. I'm gonna use the bound node to cover up the crayfish model, which its orientation is a bit off, and use the oriented bounding box, which covers the crayfish by its fitting, but minimally fitting the bounding box. Now by using this one, you'll be able to export the attribute called xform for a detail attribute. If you look at the detail attribute of this geometry, you get this 4x4 matrix, which is the transformation matrix, which includes the translation, rotation, and scaling for this bounding box. I guess there is no scaling, but there's only one, just translating and rotating. So, which is the result of rotating and translating the bounding box, which was on XYZ plane. Meaning, if you invert this matrix, transformation matrix, you could make this bounding box go back to the XYZ plane orientation. So let's try to do that. I'm going to use the point wrangle. The one that I want to rotate is this glove or a crayfish. So give that as a first input and connect the bounding box with the xform, the matrix attribute to the second input. Then let's get that matrix information first. You calling the detail xform, right? And as I said, I want to invert this, and then you can apply this transformation matrix to the position, each point position for this crayfish, like this. And now you have somehow oriented cloudfish, which is still 90 degrees flipped, but better than before, better than this one. Alright, so at this point you can just translate, you can use the transform node to rotate 90 degrees in this case the axis, like that, and voila, looks nice. Let's calculate the normal and looks pretty nice and oriented nicely. Alright, now this is the start. Okay, so first thing that I would like to do here is to make this geometry as particles, and in my case I want to make it more like a sci-fi effect, so I want to make it like a grid, square grid, could also be a hexagonal grid, but creating hexagonal grid with the texture is a bit hard, so I would like to do with the square grid. Now, in order to create a square grid on top of complex geometry, there is an easy way to do in Houdini. You can, it's not exactly a square grid, but you can use a divide node. And there's an option called, first turn off the convex polygon, there is an option called Breaker Polygon. And if you show up the edges, which in this case the glove has too many edges, so let's try with simple geometry first, something like sphere. Right. And if you try, so the sphere looks like this, and if you try the divide node with polygon, breaker polygon option, by making this value smaller, you start to see those ridge lines here on top of the sphere, which is the result of cuts made by a cube of this size in X, Y, and Z direction. And this is the outline of this intersected cube. And then what I would like to do is to take the part or intersected piece of this cube and use it as a piece to dissolve as one packed surface. So that's what I would like to do. So in order to do that, you need to have each of those like separated faces with similar attributes, right? So how do we do this? Now, in order to do that, first of all, you need to know what's the size of the cube and how this breaker polygon works. So first of all, let's give a parameter so that you can change the parameter later. I'll create a null node which stores all the global parameters that I would like to control. And waiting. Okay, it's taking time. Weirdly, it's taking too much time. Just trying to open the parameter interface. How come it's taking so much time? That's weird. Should I just reopen? Maybe. I don't know. Oh. Okay, not responding for unknown reason. I'll just go. Goodbye. Okay, now I need to go to save that file. Alright, where is it? Okay, here we go. And I also have to go to my project folder. Okay, sorry for that. This happens sometime. Okay, so let's paste this to here. Okay, let me try this again. I'm gonna reopen the Houdini. Okay. Okay, finger crossed and okay, now it works. Okay, so the parameter I wanted to set is the size of the breaker polygon, so I'll just say cube size. Okay, I guess from 0 to 1 it's okay for now. Alright, so let's copy this. To make it uniform in X, Y, and Z direction, I would like to make the size for X, Y, and Z the same, so let's just paste that parameter that I've just copied to X, Y, and Z and see how this value affects the division. Okay. The interesting things with this breaker polygon option is that even if I move the the base sphere or base geometry to any direction, the brick polygon division doesn't really change. So it's not really related to the absolute coordinate where it's being cut, but it seems like it's being based on the bounding box of the input geometry. So now that I know that it's based on the bounding base geometry, what I would like to do now is to calculate or estimate how many cubes are there going to be in the x direction, y direction, and z direction. And then for each direction, I'm going to plot an integer value or apply an integer value for each cube. In the x direction, the integer value should start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For y direction, 0, starting from the minimum value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, based on this size, which is currently 0.153, and also at the z direction, maybe if this is the minimum, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So combining all those three integers, you'll be able to uniquely identify the cube or the faces that's being cut by those cubes. Okay, and you can identify by checking the position of each primitive. If it's within this range, then that means you could estimate this ID somehow. So let's try to do that. After you have created the polygon, what I would like to do now is to use something like primitive Wrangle, in this case, I think, because you want to look at each primitive to see in which cube it is inside. Okay, based on this size and the bounding box size of this input geometry. So primitive Wrangle, I'm just gonna call this ID, and then first thing first, since you need the bounding box informations of the geometry, I'm going to get the minimum and maximum bounding out using get bbox like that, like you do always. And next, what you need to have is the size information of this cube. So let's import that as a parameter. Create a CHF channel like that and copy this value to here. Alright. Now starting from the minimum bounding box positions, which in this case should be somewhere around here at the bottom, somewhere around here. Okay, I'm going to count by size, the multiplication by multiplication of the size, and see if each primitive is in which numbers or which cube is inside, which surface includes in which cube in terms of x, y, and z. Alright, so I got a message. Why? How are your icons are so bright and saturated? Is my color a bit weird? For interface, you mean? Let me know if that's the case. I don't know if I can fix this. What was I? So, in order to do this, I am going to first of all get the middle point position of each of the primitive, which is considered at P. Easy. Now, I'm also going to offset this position by minimum so that you could consider that the position can be calculated from the 0, 0, 0 coordinate. Okay, now what you want to do next is to divide this by size. And by doing this, you are creating a float value for every x, y, and z coordinate of the point position. And by using floor after this, you're going to make the float number to integers, and if it's 0, if this number is 0, then which means it is included inside the ID equal to 0. I mean the x number equals 0, y number equals 0, z equals 0, and so on. And let's check what kind of numbers we have for this pos ID for each primitive to get the idea what I mean. So this is the primitive parameter. I mean attribute. And as you can see, the value is incremented by 1 for all x, y, and z, like this. Let's try to visualize this to see how it looks like. Okay, probably using color node. And or maybe I can just change this pos ID to color itself. Now, in order to make it as a color value, I think it makes sense to give this back to from 0 to 1 for each of the coordinate. So let's see if there's a good way to do that. Maybe you could just multiply this by size again. Okay. Now it's a bit hard to see maybe, so going back to the primitive Wrangle, maybe I'll just set the color to none, and wait, maybe I'm just gonna use the color node for primitive and use the random from attribute and choose the pos ID. Which didn't really give much anything. This looks pretty much the same. So let's just say random here based on the pos ID here, which should create some random color. Okay, so this is more obvious here. As you can see, by using this calculation, I have mapped each surfaces which being trimmed by the cube with different IDs, and each surface has three unique coordinate values, and the combination of these values are going to be the unique ID of each surfaces. So in order to make every coordinate being placed as one value, I'm first going to create a string value called name by adding all these x, y, and z coordinates as a string connected with the comma. Okay, so pos id dot x. Which I'm going to use it later. Y and Z. Okay, let's check. So I have the name attribute, which has all the x, y, and z integer value placed in one place. Okay, let's also try to create a center point position of each surfaces as well, which is which is the center of the cube in this case, I think. So let's do that. I'm going to name it as pos, and the center point of the cube is actually can be retrieved by decoding this pos ID. Alright, so first of all, by multiplying pos ID by size, you'll be able to get the real size, real coordinate size. Then you also want to start, since if you want to get the center, and this value will always start from 0, 0, 0. Okay, so you want to offset by 0.5 of this size on each x, y, and z. So give an offset for size on x, y, and z direction. Then finally, you also want to start from the bounding box minimum position to get the real position, because you have subtracted here. So you want to make it back to the original position. So this should be the final position, and let's check if this is correct. To do that, you can just try to create single point to this position, see if this is correct or not. And so this point is the center of the cube, and looks like it is correct, I guess. Yeah. Hopefully it is correct. It's not that way off, so I think it's correct. In the base, it's also based on the grid, like that. Right, looks good. Okay, I have a question from Guy. Primitive Wrangle is run over points or polygons. Primitive Wrangle runs over a primitive each polygons in this case. Sometimes it could also run on each edges, but in my case I have only polygons, so it runs on primitive or polygons. I also have a question from Big U. Can I move prim in prim wrangle by at p? No. You cannot directly move the primitive by changing at p in primitive wrangle, but you have to access the point position in order to move the primitive. For example, if you just want to move the primitive upward, and if you write it like this, it doesn't really move. Primitive doesn't work like that way. So you have to either use point wrangle, or you have to access the point number from the primitive and move each of the point stored in the, or related to that primitive to move upward. So in order to move the point position, you always have to access point. Okay, So I think I've got enough information for the particle or for the dissolve. And let's start to create some base dissolve effect out of here. And I'm going to switch this back to a lobster or crayfish, and it gives me an error somehow. How is that? Let me try to rebuild. Okay, now it works. Okay. Now the problem with this 3D scan geometry is that it's a bit too big. I mean, in terms of the meshes, it's too high res. So let's reduce this a bit by trying not to change its UVs to mess up with the textures. So I'm going to use the poly reduce for this high res mesh as much as possible. If I make it 10%, okay, that's not really good. Let me first fuse the vertices before to see if it fixes a little, but not too good. Make it 20%, better. So looks okay. Looking from far doesn't really look weird, so looks okay. So let's go with this. And the number of vertices has been limited so far. Okay, so looks good. So let's go with this one. Let's also give a switch node so that you can switch between different geometries for dissolve effect. For testing, I'm gonna go with the crayfish. Alright, now the next thing I would like to do is to create some hierarchy between the particles to define from which particle should dissolve to the end. Okay, now the easiest way I could think of is to place several points in the space and calculate the distance, and based on the distance, based on the shortest distance, I'm going to decide when to start dissolving each particle or each grid face. So let's give custom or several points which you want to use it for a agent or attractor to use it to calculate the shortest distance. So just place random points anywhere you want. I currently have 2 points, so I guess one starts from the glove, one starts from the tail, like that. Okay, and let's try to calculate the distance, shall we? So in order to calculate distance, the distance that I want to calculate is between the center point of the grid to each point. So what you want to do is to calculate the distance between the one that's stored in the primitive attribute called pos. This is the center point of the grid, and the actual point position of each point. Okay. Now to do that, I think it makes sense, and for later usage, you want to dissolve each particle separately. And currently the problem with this model is that if you double click the faces, all the faces are connected like this. But actually you want to separate based on this connection, or based on this grid connection. Okay, grid part. So let's first of all separate each faces based on pos ID or position, such that kind of information, or could be a name. So to do that, I'm going to use a unique points node, and based on the attribute which in my case want to use the primitive attribute. Doesn't show up here, but I think I can use the primitive attribute anyway. So let's try to use pos ID, right? And see if it separated the face by trying to double click the face, and as you can see now the face has been splitted into a bunch of grid face made by a Bricker polygon option from divide node, which is good. Alright. And each primitive which is in the same cube shares the same position. So what I could do now is to calculate the normal position for each point, and then promote it to attribute promoted to a primitive, which will going to be useful for later usage. Like that. So that each primitive will have the same normal attribute. Okay. I'll tell you how this could be useful later. Now let's try to calculate the distance based on the primitive position and the point position customly set by yourself. Alright, so to do this, since the position that I would like to use to calculate the distance is inside a primitive Wrangle, a primitive attribute, I can use the primitive Wrangle for that. Connecting the crayfish to the first input and connect the custom points to the second input. And let's try to calculate the distance. And what I would like to get is the shortest distance out of 2 points or multiple points coming from the second input to each of the primitive. So first of all, get the position out of primitive, then loop through all the points from second input then get the point position from the second input like that. Now it's time to calculate the distance between, oops, I shouldn't name it the same. Let's name this primpos. So in between the primitive position and the point position, you get some kind of distance. And since you have multiple points, you want to search for the minimum value. So one of the technique to get the minimum out of all the point list is to first of all create a variable which has a really big number like this, and then create the conditions between this minimum distance and the current distance that you have just calculated. And if the minimum distance is larger than the current distance, then update the minimum distance so that minimum distance always will have the shortest or the shortest distance. Yeah. Then as a result, you'll get the smallest or shortest distance, and that's the one you want to store on each primitive. Alright, looking at the primitive Wrangle, primitive this attribute, you get this distance, and if you share the same position ID, you get the same distance because you are using the same position attribute here. Alright. And based on this distance, I would like to create a dissolve particle dissolve effect. So if the distance is close to 0, that's the one starts to dissolve first, then gradually dissolve to the further distance, like this one. This will be the last grid to be dissolved. Okay, so in order to control it together with the frame range here, I think it's wise to get the minimum value of this distance, minimum maximum value of this distance, so that you can control the timing precisely, even if you have different distance for different geometries. You can generalize the output. So let's calculate the minimum and maximum of the distance using attribute promote for each primitive and store it in detail. Change the name to minimum distance. Don't delete the original, and then set the minimum. And you want to calculate the distance. Do the same for the maximum. Change this to maximum. Change the name to max distance. As a result, going into the detail attribute, you get the minimum distance and maximum distance like this. Okay. Why don't you use the node distance along mesh? Distance along mesh. I haven't used this. I haven't used that. Is this one? Distance. I guess this is the geodesic distance calculations. Well, I guess this one will calculate the distance for each point to point, right? But the thing is that I don't want to calculate the distance from point to point, but I want to calculate distance from point to one of the attribute inside a primitive. Okay. For example, this primitive. This primitive have this whole primitive, each one of them has the same attribute called pos and shares the same position, which is the center of the cube, right? And I want to calculate the distance, that position, with the custom points, okay? So I am not sure if you can do that with this one, with this limited amount of parameters. Probably you could with some tweaking, but I am not sure how to use this. And this is also a geodesic distance, so maybe, I mean, using geodesic distance is totally fine, but currently, since I'm not calculating the distance with the one that's on the point, that's on the surface, this is just the attribute, so you can't actually use the geodesic distance. So I think this might not work. I mean, if you tweak a little bit, might be able to use it. I don't know. Or the other one, distance from geometry, this might be able to, but I guess this is also based on point to point distance, so probably this could be also difficult to use. Yeah, if you know what I mean. So this only calculates the distance from each point to point, but I actually don't really want to calculate distance from point to point, but the attribute from the primitive to point, so it's a bit tricky. So it's not just a simple distance thing, you know. So I guess in order to use that, I need to tweak this original geometry to be able to use that kind of node. Alright, I hope you get that. Now I have minimum distance and maximum distance. Now what I would like to do is, I think I have all the necessary information for dissolve effect to create the animation, so let's try using this at this point. I'm gonna use again a primitive wrangle, or comparing with primitive wrangle and point wrangle, I think point wrangle runs faster because it can deal with simultaneous points in one time. Okay, but for primitive wrangle, in order to create the animation, you somehow need to access the points from each primitive, which in that case you need to make a loop inside a wrangle, which makes a bit slower than point wrangle. So to make it performative, to make it efficient, I'm going to use point wrangle instead, which should be going to be faster a little bit compared to primitive wrangle, but either way is fine. Using primitive wrangle might be easier to do, but let's go with this. Alright, now first of all, let's get those detail attribute, the minimum distance and maximum distance. Max distance. And then get the actual distance from primitive. Now it is not stored inside the point. As you can see, it's stored inside a primitive. So shall we also promote that as an average value to point? Attribute promote from primitive to point as an average value. Don't delete the original. As a result, you get distance on point as well. Alright. So distance is f at dist. Now first thing I like to do is to try to make this distance in between 0 to 1, normalize it for easy usage. So I'm gonna call this d, and using fit function to remap the distance which is in between minimum distance to maximum distance and make it from 0 to 1. This is called normalizing, and it's always useful to make a value something like this in this range, 0 to 1. Okay. Now next, since I want to deal with the animation, in this case using these frame values, so let's try to create some frame based value, shall we? So in our case, let me think how we could do that. I mean, what I would like to do is to, from using the distance, I want to change the scale of each particle from smallest distance to starting to dissolve from the smallest distance to the farther distance. Okay, so if I just want to, I'm gonna try to use this d as it is for now to scale each particle to see how it looks like. Now in order to do that, you need the center point position of the square grid. So let's also promote that, which is called position. Okay. So I'm gonna call it center. Okay. So first of all, you offset each point by a center so that each point will become. I think it's not working. Okay, I do have these values here. Seems like points are not really moving somehow. Okay, it is. So by moving each point with this center point position, interestingly enough, all the points are within this single cube. Pretty nice. Condensed pig head. Okay. Well, what I wanted to do is to, after I have moved this into the center, what I wanted to do is to scale each point by this d value based on the d. Okay, change something, and after you have scaled it, you want to make this back to the original position by adding center point position of the cube again. And as a result, you get this map, which kind of shows the how much distance you have for each primitive or each point. Right here, when the scale is really small, which indicates that the d value is really close to 0. And when the square is really big, like somewhere around here, which means the scale value is close to 1. Now, what I want to do is to animate these gradient from small to big. Okay, and then how do we do that? And in order to do that, I somehow need to use this frame value somewhere. Okay, now let's consider scale as t. I'm going to replace with t, and for now I'm just going to copy d, just the same. Now what I could think of is to, by remapping this d with some kind of value, for example fit, and if I make it 0.3, 0.7 and remap it back to 0 and 1, we're going to have some kind of range like this. Interestingly, if I make this to 1 at the end, something like that. If I make this to 0.7 or 0.8 and this one to be 0, you get another kind of range. So what I could think of is by changing those value, I could somehow create some kind of animations, and changing those value based on the frame might do something. So let's try to create some frame based value for this value and this value here. And I'm gonna name this as min d for this value and max d for this value. Alright, now what will be suitable for each of the value? I'm just gonna test by just using the frame as it is and see how it works. Maybe trying to change minimum first and fix the max to 1. And since it might make sense to normalize this frame as well, because D is in between 0 to 1, so, and the frame is in between 1 to the end of the frame, which is in this case 240, so you can say f start from f start to f end, normalize it to 0 to 1, and see how it does. Okay, if I play it, so it seems like it gradually dissolves like this. Interesting. How does it look like when it is for max D? Now this is more like it. You're starting to see the dissolve from the shortest distance to the maximum distance. So this approach looks like a way to go. So let's start by trying to modify this max D value. Alright. But the problem here is that it's just dissolving using the whole frame, which is not really ideal. You just want to use part of the frame to dissolve gradually to make a bit more neat effect. So let's try to create some value gradient range. It could be an integer, I guess, since this is a frame. And let's say you want to use certain number of frames for gradient. For example, like use 40 frames. So within 40 frames you have gradients, and above that or less than that you get scale 0 or scale 1. Okay, so that's what I would like to have here. And in order to do that, let's see how we could do that. So let's think. Somehow we do need to remap this frame for sure. Okay, and let's see. Since this is an offset value, I think what I could do is to subtract this offset end with grad range. See what happens. Okay, and I believe I also need to change this minimum D as well, using the same frame but with different offset. Okay, go along with the maximum D. Now this one and this one currently is the same value, so let's try to subtract this one so that you have some range between this one and then this one. You have exactly grad range difference between the minimum D and maximum D. Okay, as a result, you start to see something you want. Nice. And if you change this to 0, you no longer see any gradient, it just disappears like that. If you see it carefully, this being 0, so this value and this value become the same in that case. So you're just creating value either 0 or 1. So that's the reason you're getting either 0 or 1 as a scale. But if you have this in between range here, if you have a value in between this one and this one, you have some value in between 0 to 1 within this frame, we'll be able to create some gradient scale like this based on the frame. Now it already looks pretty nice. Alright, so after this, I think it's much easier to set several options. For example, currently the dissolve starts from the very first frame, as you can see. As soon as it reached to the second frame, it starts to dissolve, and if it reached to the final frame, it just ends as is. If you want to have some offset frame, like you want to keep this geometry still for 10 frames in the start, and also keep it disappeared for 10 frames at the end, you might want to set some additional offset frame parameters to this one. For example, if you want to keep the state of this crayfish for 10 frames, let's name this start offset. Give it 10. Now I guess I need to bring this somewhere inside this minimum D and maximum D. Now, where could that be? I could just try. It's a bit hard to imagine, so I'm just going to try to subtract it here first of all. See what happens. So it does start, so it doesn't really look like the one that I wanted. Nope. So what about placing it here? Nope, not really. I might need to subtract this to both minimum D and maximum D, after all, like I did for the grand range. So let's see where I should do that. Let me also try this here. Okay, now I see that I am getting some start off from the very first frame. So in order to avoid this, I think this should not go here, but this should go here. Right. And also you want to subtract it, but the end. And probably you want to do this to here and here. Now it's getting a bit too complex. Okay. So I do see that from within 10 frames it's not really moving, but I do see some holes here. What's this? Huh. Interesting. That doesn't supposed to happen. Even with the frames equal to 0, still happens. I guess that is because when the distance is equal to 0, okay, consider this is equal to 0 and the minimum d and maximum d is somewhat from I don't know, 0 to 1. I guess it's a bit hard to remap the value which is equal to 0, so I guess I might need to make a bit more than 0, just a little bit like that, just to avoid this remapping 0 value illegally. Because if distance is d is equal to 0 and if this one and this one is the same value, then you get the remap just goes wild, crazy. So in order to avoid that, might need to go just above 0 for this one. Maybe probably the same for the value equal to 1, so just in case, I'm gonna make this like that. I don't know. Maybe I don't need to do this. Alright. Okay. So, by increasing the start offset, I can stop this state for a while, then start dissolving till the end. Okay, so the same idea could be applied for the end offset, probably by subtracting some value to one of the equations. Although this looks a bit too complex already, so maybe I don't really need this, but as a log, I mean, you could skip this part for sure. Okay, I'm going to create another parameter, end, and the end part should go. So first of all, so it is the end information, so I think I only need to subtract the f end part here. Okay, so an offset, also this one, and let's see what happens. So let's say I want to keep the disappearing frame for 20 frames. So this is where it disappeared, and you have somewhere 20 frames left at the end. Make it as a blank space, okay, which might not really be useful, but just as a tip, this could be some useful template for some animation setup, maybe. Alright, so far so good. Let's try to make the animation a bit more interesting, not just scaling, but implementing rotation, coloring, lift or dissolve effect, which goes like upward to make it look like disappearing in the air, and so on, based on this t value. Okay, so first of all, scale. Now scale could be just based on the t as it is, but you could also use ramp attribute to make a scale animation a bit more interesting. Right now this is just a linear curve, but making it like a spline curve, something like that. You can see a bunch of interesting scaling animation, or like that. starting slowly but goes really fast afterwards. Well, this might be much interesting. Something like that. How's right? Or you could also try some crazy animations like this. Just somehow interesting. You can see some kind of a wavy animated particle. Although I'm just gonna keep it simple. I think I like this curve. I'm gonna keep it like this. Now let's try to implement some rotation to each of the grid, shall we? So for the rotation I need to create an angle, okay, based on this t value. Makes sense, I think. So let's create a remap this t to an angle value. When the t is equal to 0, that means the particle has been dissolved completely. So that's when you rotate maximum. So let's create an angle value as a parameter, multiply by pi. So if it's equal to 1, you rotate 180 degrees. If it's 2, you rotate to 360 degrees. And if t is equal to 1, angle make it 0 when particles are not really moving or dissolving. Okay, let's try with this angle with 2 for now. 360 degrees. Let's see what happens. Now I've just created an angle. In order to rotate the points, you need to create the rotational matrix or quaternion to rotate the vectors. So I'm going to create the matrix called rotational mat. Starting from ident, rotate the matrix by this angle. And now I also need to define the rotational axis. Now, the axis of each point or each primitive can be retrieved from the primitive, I guess. And last time I have created this normal attribute promoted to primitive, and this could be the axis for the rotation, I think. So let's try to use this one for rotation. So again, I'm going to promote the normal back to point as an average value and try to use that as an axis. Okay, and then after I have rotated the matrix, I need to apply the rotation somewhere. I could either do after scaling or before scaling. Maybe I'll do it before scaling. Like that. Now you can see that the particle or grid is rotating till the end for 360 degrees. Like that. And if I make the rotation to 1, it's just going to rotate 180 degrees. If I make it 0.2, just rotate a little bit. Like that. Okay, if you make it 10, maybe that's too much for rotation, it's too fast. So keep it as 2 for now. Now you could also try to use ramp for angle as well, but I'm just gonna keep it as it is. If you want to try, please do. And let's see. The next thing I would like to do is to try to lift the grid upward so that it looks like it's floating in the air and disappears. So let's try to create that. I'm going to create the parameter call up, which is going to be the value, how much it's going to lift it up. Okay, so let's start with 1, the value 1. And I want to gradually lift these particles upward. Well, you could also move to the normal direction, but it's your choice. Let's try to make this go upward. And in order to do that, you just need to use this to lift up somewhere, maybe after all the position has been decided. Going to add additional vectors upward. Width up multiplied by t. So I guess I'll just multiply it here. T. Okay, which looks weird because original geometry has lifted up, so in this case I think I need to subtract 1 by t. Alright. Now you can see that the particles start to lift up, that starting to dissolve in the air. Interesting. Now this might be too geometric, I mean too I don't know, balanced, too organized. So I might want to randomly lift up or change the value of this lift amount randomly. So I'm going to introduce some randomness here. And the seed should be based on the primitive based value, so that could be primitive position, I guess. Do I have that? Do I have that? That is the center here, so let's bring this up to here and use the center to create the random value. And now the amount of the lift up for each grid has changed randomly. Becomes a bit more natural. Like that. Looks nice. And what's this? Alright, looks nice, I think. Now let's also change the color based on this t value, which is pretty easy to do. I'm just going to change the color based on the t, I guess. So I'm going to use the fit function for t, for 0, 1, t. So when the t is equal to 0, meaning when it's going to dissolve, I'm gonna make the color to blue. Otherwise, make it white. And I don't see any difference because I guess I'm missing something, or if the color is just too dim. Let's increase the value here. Okay, it does work. I've just increased the blue value a lot more than one to make it brighter and brighter. I don't know how it looks on this live stream, but looks like it's been emissioned. Now I guess it's too bright, but that's okay. If I hide the edges, nice. So that's how you do it. I mean, I think I have just told everything I wanted to tell you. This is how I have implemented this simple grid-based sci-fi-like dissolve effect procedurally. And the good thing for this part is that you can change all those parameters you have set by not going back and forth. So for example, these ones, like change the gradient value, can make it more gradient. If you don't want any rotation, you can do that. If you don't want any up value, you can also do that. Looks more like a sci-fi, I guess, with the colors. Yeah. You can also change the offset and so on and so on. And you can also change those timings for colors, lift parameters or angles with these ramp parameters as well to make more animation, the animation a bit more interesting. Okay, so that was it, pretty much it. And trying out with other geometries, it should still work. Everything works with any kind of geometry. Like that. Being eaten by something. Looks cool. If you want to try out with our favorite pig head, let's make this a little bit bigger. Something like that. And you could also, if you want, you could also add multiple points, additional points to this one. Just add 1 point and move that anywhere you want in order to calculate the distance. This is done in real time, so, and the speed is pretty decent, I think, so you could try various design options with this, I guess. Okay, and play. There you go. You no longer have big head. Noise を使ってもかっこよさそう。Yes, using noise might also looks really nice as well, for sure. I guess there are many ways to use the noise with. Instead of using point, you could just create the noise field. Based on the position on the pig head, I guess. Oops. Just use the same attribute with the noise. Ooh, what happened? Okay, well, I shouldn't use at P, but I should use the position, this one here. So, okay. Interesting. Okay. You could also change the scale to smoothen out the effect. Something like that. This is also nice. Okay. Let's try to bring all the parameters I can control to this no controller for organization, for organize. And let me know if you guys have any questions or feedback or anything. That'll be great. First of all, you have a switch to change the shape from 0 to, I don't know, 5. You have grid size. You have, what else? Maybe an option to change this distance calculation. I'll just call this dist type. And you have several parameters. Gradient frame. Start offset frame, frame, and offset frame. The effect reminds me of the GameCube load screen. I haven't touched the GameCube. I think I was in the foreign country at that time, couldn't play anything. But I'm curious how it looks like. Dissolve angle and up distance. There we go. Maybe I can increase the range. All right. Cute. This could also look good on simple geometries like cube as well, I think. Cube is basically a bunch of squares, so it works great with the grid cube grid. Make the size big, something like that. Switch it to the cube. I guess I need to also normalize it at the end. Right? Play it. Oh, think I need to remove the cache here. Nice. Now if I make this cube size really small, it would also look nice. More like a matrix-like effect. Yeah. Looks pretty nice. I think I like it. Going back to the crayfish. Now that I see like this, I'm getting an idea that I might wanna change this to some kind of a number or something to make it more like a sci-fi look. I'd love to see a tetrisphere setup, dividing layers of piece onto a sphere. Let me search for that term. It's the first time I hear tetrisphere. 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 Nintendo 64. Interesting. Ah, okay, I see what you mean. Love to see a tetrisphere setup, dividing layers into pieces onto a sphere. Dividing layers of piece. Interesting. Interesting. I see. This is interesting. I guess you could do that out of not from a sphere but from a box. A simple box. Let's show the edge. And by subdividing it so many times, it becomes like a sphere. Like that. And it is a quad mesh. So using those quads, you could somehow create similar Tetris-like blocks out of those cube, I guess. It'd be interesting to see your approach on how to use the radial basis function in Houdini to do something like this. Radial basis function. Let me also search for that. Radial. Is a real value. So it depends on all distance between the input at some points, either origin, code center, so that property for the function. The distance is usually Euclidean distance, although other metrics are sometimes used. It often uses collection some of radial basis functions at the process. Interesting. Interesting. I think I need to look into this carefully to see how I could use this, but surely I am pretty interested in this. It's not really related to your questions, but the way to calculate the distance might be able to change here. For example, if you wanna, let's say if you wanna use other kind of metrics for distance instead of Euclidean distance, for example, if you wanna use something like Manhattan distance, you could go to here instead of using distance. I think what I could do is, I don't know what's the easiest way to calculate the Manhattan distance, but first of all you can calculate the difference vector, prim pos minus pos, then just add the absolute component of x y and z. Let's see what would give you as a result. Okay. So this is one, this is, wait a minute. It's not that interesting. Maybe I'm just miscalculating. Let me check. Okay, so I think I'm doing correctly, so that was correct. So what you get is more like a rather like distance. But in terms of this small grid, doesn't really make any difference overall. Not so interesting. What else? Let me try the sphere one, this one. Although this is already been divided into square, and I don't know, if you wanna create a bunch of blocks out of here, I'm not sure what's the best way to do this. I don't know, clusters? No, I don't think so. Maybe using some kind of octree, like that might. Just gonna try to, now if you don't want to use the divide node to create the block, but instead you just want to bring up some custom like grid by yourself to use it, something like this instead, what you could do is you could try to mimic these pos ID, pos and name for your custom grid. In this case, one primitive is one grid, so it's pretty simple. And you just need to set the position as at P, which is the center of the primitive, and pos ID could be just the same, and the name is based on maybe primitive number. So that's pretty much it, I guess. and try to connect that to a unique point. Let's see if it's going to work. And there you go. It just works. Right. So if you want to use your custom grid, then this is the way to go. Just apply corresponding attribute. All right. Okay, well, I am curious about the radius basis function, but I think I have to look into it to see how exactly it works and how exactly I could use it. Right. Anything else you guys are interested in or any feedback, or if not, I'm just gonna end the live. The link I sent is for... Well, I would like to see the link, but I think it is not listed in the chat. Or is it deleted? I'm not sure. Is it because of the, I don't know, security issues on YouTube? I mean, at least I didn't delete it. I am seeing the wiki in Japanese, but interesting. Interesting enough. Let me also try other ways to calculate the distance. Instead of taking the minimum distance, what if I just add all these distance together? Like that. Just to test out how it looks like. And I don't really see any notable changes. It just looks like the center becomes here. And that's pretty much it. Looks like it's just modifying the total center of the distance calculations. Interesting. Is there another ways to dissolve effect? I guess there are so many ways to dissolve. For sure. I mean, you could use just the points like as a particle, or you could use volumes like many of the Houdini users do. I think there are tons of tutorials for that out there. You could also use shaders as well, which is not really geometrically related, so I don't do that here. Maybe for if you want to use shaders, using game engines or touch designers might be better in that case. But I guess if you want to do geometrically, you somehow need to remesh like what I did. If you want to use points, you just scatter points on top of the geometry and move it with, I don't know, a pop field or something like that. Or if you want to use volumes, you could use volume Wrangle or some DOP network to deal with that, or pyros or something like this. What I just showed you is using the mesh to dissolve the geometry, which is pretty low cost way to use, I guess. If the object was affected by gravity, what would it be your approach in activating pieces that are already detached from the main body? If the object was affected by gravity, what would be your approach in activating pieces? Infinite War film from Marvel was some dissolve effect. Okay, the Infinity War films one is using particle, I assume. The one that smokes out, right? The one goes to the sand effect by doing this. Yeah, that was, I think that's using particles. For the gravity part, what I would do is, if I don't use any kind of solvers, I do need to use some kind of solvers. I guess I need to use either a DOP solver or a SOP solver. I think for my case, I would choose to use SOP solver for that purpose. I mean, to do that, you do need to calculate the acceleration for the gravity for sure, but and velocity by yourself. But I guess that's what I would do. Or you could also use DOP solver or maybe a vellum solver to move those detached geometry based on the condition. I guess using vellum solver is much easier in those cases. Right. What I could think of is the one that's not being detached. You could set the mass attribute to 0 so that it won't move. Then right after it has been detached, you can set the mass to more than 0, maybe equal to 1. Then try to apply the gravity force to those pieces. In those cases, you need to get rid of those procedural animation stuff, because that's not going to work well with vellum solver, I think. If you want to still use these calculations, or if you want to still use these animations, I guess you need to create your custom solver using SOP solver. So in those cases, I mean, in that term, vellum solver is a bit limited, but can do complex stuff pretty easily for sure. Yeah. I could try it. But I cannot guarantee if it's going to work. So, cross fingers, finger crossed. For example, if I want to use Vellum Solver, I should just create a. I mean, scaling is fine to have, but rotation. I mean, I'll have to set these inside the solver. So it's gonna be a bit tricky. And also, these conditions are all procedurally set, so you have to do this inside the solver with some different solutions. That's gonna be a bit hard to do. Okay, well, instead of using this, try to use a soft solver. What's the best way to do that? I mean, at least you also need to use this inside a soft solver for sure. First of all, I need to remake what I have written here with the sub solver, which I don't know if it's going to be hard or not. Okay. So what will going to happen here? No, we don't want to incrementally scale things up or down. So what we need is the original position, which is not a best thing to do for the solver, but I'm just going to give a rest. And instead of using the point position, I'm going to use the rest and be rest multiplied by rotmat, be rest multiplied by c, center, now in order to add the gravity, you actually cannot really use rest positions, but this is just a test if I get the same result. Okay. I see something weird. Interesting. Why do I get that? That is because okay, it's missing the parameters. All right. And I don't see any scaling happens somehow. Okay. I should do this. And I should do this. And I should do like that. Okay, there you go. So now I get the same result. Oh, no. Not really? What happened? This is really funny. It's rotating really crazy. Why is that? I'm supposed to reset the position here. What if I do like this? Oh, wow. Oh, shoot. Okay, well, obviously something is wrong. Maybe the rotation, maybe some attribute. Oh, why am I getting 0 here? Oh, okay, this is fine. Okay, well, this is also fine. What if I make this like that? Okay, and okay, this is also fine. Scaling looks also fine, so the rotation is something wrong. Probably the axis is wrong. Maybe the axis is changing because of this one. Now I know why. Yeah, I shouldn't have this updated. So there you go. Now now you could it's time to know when it has been started to does the rotation looks okay? I guess so. Now the timing which starts to dissolve is related to this one and this one. Okay, and the condition with the D here. D, where is D? Yeah, here. So if D is, if T, in this case, if T is less than 1, that means it start to scale down, meaning it start to dissolve, detached. So that's the condition where you want to say the primitive has started to, or point has started to detach. Let's check. You could check it by creating a color node. Looking at the detached group. and just set red. There you go. The condition works. Now you want to apply some forces to those detached group on each frame. And for each frame, you somehow need to update the rest position. Wow, that sounds like interesting things to try out. So, actually the detached points are sharing the same pos ID or primitive related value, okay? Am I spelling correctly? I don't think so. Detach. No. If it's detached, then you want to add some gravity. Something like that. Then you also want to update your velocity. With your acceleration. You also want to limit your velocities to some value, because you are going to have some kind of friction in the air. So let's set up some maximum velocity value. I don't know how much that would be, but and in order to do that, first calculate the current velocity, then get the minimum out of velocity and the max velocity, then multiply it with a normalized velocity, like that. Oops. Okay, this is correct. This is also correct. What's... oh, okay, CHF. So the max velocity, I'm not sure how much would that be. Let's make it 100. Okay, maybe that's too big. Oh, I am not sure. Now, after that, you want to move the point based on this velocity, okay? And you don't want to move your current point position, but instead you want to move the center point of this primitive instead, right? So that is the position. And you could, or how do I, yeah, I'll just try to move the position. And you might also want to move the rest positions as well by the same value. You cannot just add velocity as it is, because this is too big as a number, so it's multiply by some small numbers as a constant value. I don't know how much I would need to make it small, but just to try out. And also update the rest by velocity. And see how this works. Okay, I don't see it moving. I mean, first of all, let me make the up to 0 so that I can see that if it's moving downward or not. And also, let's try to make the constant value a little bit bigger, like this. Oops. Okay, it's not really moving downwards, so I guess I'm not doing correctly. First of all, I want to know if this is working or not, so try to change the color. So it is changing the color, so that's good. Now what I want to know is if it's changing the rest parameter or attribute, and for the point right here, which is being detached somewhere around here. I want to know if these values are changing. Not only changing. And why is that? What if I just say 0, -1, 0 for the rest? And what if I'm not limited to the detached group? Would that change the rest in the solver? Okay, it is not, so I guess I'm doing something wrong here. Or do I need to go outside the loop to take it? Okay, it is changing now. So it has to go outside the loop. Okay. So, just gonna make this back to the way it is. Let me see what happens. Oop. And I can clearly see that it's too fast. Maybe that's too slow. Okay, there you go. A gravity effect somehow. And the null node is also going down. Interesting. I mean, I don't know if this is the one you were looking for, but at least this seems to work in this particular case. But yeah, I mean, you could update based on this setup and try to implement your own force for sure. Yeah, it seems to work. I mean, I believe you could do the same with the vellum easily, but trying to control it with the conditions might be a bit harder. So using subsolver is easy for me. Okay. Okay, so looks good. I'll just keep it right here so that you could download and see how it works later. Alrighty. So this is for the procedural process. This is using the solver process. Or maybe frame-based. I mean, this is also frame-based. Huh? I don't know, this is also kind of a procedural, so can't really... The naming is a bit misleading, but I don't know. Let me just say it as procedural. You'll get it. And so that's it. Let me know if you guys have any questions. If not, I think I'll end this live here. Let me just give a little bit of organize and there you go. Thank you for all the comments, all the feedbacks, and being here with me. Appreciate it. I can use some mask for different dissolving. Yeah, I think so. You could also use like mask for the masks for the dissolving for sure. Different dissolving, yeah. Probably, yeah. Think so. If you want to, maybe changing the cube size based on the mask is not really ideal because it's going to create some gaps in between the different cubes. So, but you could change parameters like probably like speed or how to calculate the distance, start frame offset and so on, angle, uplift, so on. I guess you could try to change that for sure. Shall we try that? Where did it go? It's disappeared. Okay, so where was I? Oh, what? Okay, so using mask. So after you have geometries right here. Shall I do this here or before? I'm not sure. I don't know, something like using a paint tool. Paint color, paint a mask, paint a mask. And okay, well, using this mask sometimes crashes my Houdini I don't know why, but it does. So, gotta be careful. And let's make it as over. I mean, add. And let's use this for. Actually, I want to paint the mask on each primitive. I mean, each cube related point, so I've never done it, but let's see if I can use the pack. Okay, so you have the pack geometry. Each one should be, wait a minute. Why am I not able to select? Okay, I think I'm missing something. I do have the name here. I just pick the first one. Where is it? Okay, so yeah, it's supposed to give you those pieces one by one. Although I seem to be able to select the whole piece somehow. I don't know. Get it. Instead, I'm going to. Let's see. Or I could still use the pack. But let's see if I can use the paint on top of the pack, which might crashes, but let's see. Okay, as I assumed. Don't worry, I saved it. Okay. Pack seems to always crash on my computer for unknown reason. Maybe it's not suitable for Macintosh. So instead of using pack with the paint, I'm gonna convert this into a point. By deleting the original point, which is a pack geometry, and instead add a new point at the same position, like that, which corresponding to the number of faces. Now I also want to transfer the primitive attributes, so let's try to give all the information that I would like to bring up. Assemble node packing. Huh. I think I never used that. Assemble node packing. I don't know how to use this. How do I use this? Breaking piece of geometry uses groups and connected pieces created by break and operated output servers. I see. I see. Duly distribute and compass all geometry. Mm-hmm. Nice. Now, guess I need to input something here, but I am not sure what to give. Well, I'm gonna look into this later. For now, I'm just gonna do what I'm comfortable with. So, the geometry, name, what else? That's probably it. And get all those primitives. Create pack primitive, or have the checkbox on creative pack geometry. Okay, let me see. Create. Okay, so the number changed. How did it fact based on what? Can I mean guess there is a way to select the attribute to okay, this one. Nope. So I guess this has to be an integer. Integer primitive with piece number will be created storing. What's the difference with the pack with this name attribute? I don't know. I mean, I don't really need the packed geometry, I think, because I already have it. There is a checkbox of creating name attribute. Oh, really? Okay. Let's checkbox to creating name attribute. Create name attribute. Create a primitive attribute called name. Identify primitive belongs to each pieces. Okay. Although I already have the attribute called name here, then I want to use this to pack the geometry actually. So, which is already done here. So I think I can skip using this one. Probably. Because everything is already being splitted and can be used as packed, so I guess I still need to transfer the attributes like this. And okay, I guess I need to make sure that this is the vector. Check. Okay, I don't get anything. Prim 0. Why is that? Ah, okay. I shouldn't use this one, but instead this one. Alright. So do the same for a pos ID. But what was the what was I trying to do here? Forgot. What did I trying to do here? Totally forgot. So I have the crayfish here. Oh yeah, the mask. Yes, the mask. Forgot. So yes, the mask. So I have these points, so I can just create a mask on top of for each of these points, I think. Let's see. So and let's try to create an attribute in order to see what value I have for each point as a masking value. Just gonna call it mask. Right, everything is 0 right now, but by using the mask with the paint. Okay, let me save this. I would like to draw some value here. And paint, add. Let's set this to an integer. Okay. Now I want to make the FG integer to 1, BG integer to, I don't know, -1. Oops. So if I draw this, do I get the mask attribute? Okay. Now what I want to see is this mask being visualized as a text, but it doesn't really show up. Where did it go? Why does text is not showing anymore? Why am I having random as why am I setting this to color? Wait a minute, doesn't really look correct. I need to make it as a text. Okay, doesn't have it. Just oops. Oh, I think I deleted it. Okay. Point. Make it large. Alright. Now I can see a bunch of values here, 2, 3, And if I use the control, I think it's supposed to subtract, which doesn't seem to. Should I set the fill? Nope. Or screen. Yeah, screen should be better. There you go. Although it's a bit hard to control with the ad, so I'm just gonna go over after all. First of all, I'm gonna reset the 0, then draw some mask with 1 and 2. So I have in total 3 values, 0, 1, and 2. So let's try to change based on those mask value. Alright. Let me move this downward a little bit. And I also wanted to apply a name attribute, bring the name attribute from primitive, which can be used to identify which points belongs to which primitive. So all right. Let's see. Okay, so each point has its name, unique name, which could be considered as an ID. Now, going back to the primitive here, let's try to transfer that mask information to this primitive using primitive Wrangle. Transferring, I guess there are many ways to do that, but my way is to first of all find the point which shares the same attribute. So using find attrib_val function from the second input, what you are looking for is the point, class name, and the actual value is s at name on primitive. There, and you should be able to find the corresponding point from the second input, which has the mask information. So get that, then transfer it to a primitive as an attribute. Now hopefully I'll be able to get the mask information to primitive, and looks correct, I guess. Hopefully, yeah, I get those numbers from 0 to 2. So all is good, connected here. Then you could go to where you want to use this mask for. If you want to use it for distance calculations, you could use the mask here. If you want to use it for dissolve effect, you could use here. Let's try to go here. And for example, if you want to change, let's say, color for easy preview. If you want to use the mask for the color information, The color is controlled right here, so let's say let's first create the lit color with 000, and let's also bring the mask information to points by again using this attribute promote. Oops, not this one. From primitive to point, you want to bring the mask and check the points and check that you have a mask information to each point. Hopefully this is correct. And then going back to this dissolve and get the mask. You can get the mask by accessing to the integer mask attribute. So you could go here, since you have 0, 1, 2 value, which can also be used to access the coordinate for the vector. So you could do something like that. Then replace this with lit col. Lit col. And let's see how it goes. Red, blue, green, based on the mask. Okay, seemed to work. And this color should change based on what I have drawn here. So let's okay, again. Damn. Did I save this? I don't know. Maybe I did. Careful with the mask, it crashes. I mean, I guess it's only my condition, but happens a lot. But at least it seems to work, so good to know. Do I have all the code? Yes. The background becomes brighter. Okay, so you could use those masks for any kind of change. For, I don't know, like change the amount of lift, or you could change in which direction it moves. That could also be interesting. Just ring this as a move. This one goes to the right, this one goes to the front, this one goes to the up. Well, not that visually impressive, but I guess it could be a base for interesting setup. Okie dokie. I'm just gonna make this back to the original. Try not to mess up so much. Yeah, this is enough to see how mask can be used. Can it be a texture from outside? Can it be a texture from outside? instead of dissolving goes from this to like this, like playing reversely, you mean? If that's what you mean, that's easy to do. You could just change this t going from 1 to 0. There, from nowhere, starts to appear. Okay, I guess that's not what you meant. For example, texture like ramp colors, but use a texture. For example, textures like okay. Texture like ramp colors. Can it be you mean? Not quite sure what you really meant. Right, so texture like rump colors, but use a texture. To use a rump color for what exactly? Texture. Oh. I mean PNG with black and white color on. Okay, I see. In order to mask, you mean? Okay. Yeah, I think you could do that. I mean, based on the texture or UV, you could just import the mask drawings or mask image to apply it to the in this case a crayfish, and then use it for the masking for sure. But I guess it's based on the texture layout of this crayfish, and I think the texture layout of this crayfish is a bit too complex. Let me check. Because this is the scanned image, it's not being modeled by hand, so that kind of this kind of stuff, I think it's a bit too hard to use the PNG as it is using the current UV. Well, let's see. Not this one. So this is the texture, and obviously it's a bit too hard to determine the relation between the UV and the texture. It's a bit too complex. It's a bit too randomly packed. I guess it's because of the 3D scanning. But we just want to try mapping like randomly, or just a flat mapping or plane mapping. That could work. Let's try with simple textures. Just gonna draw a simple okay, guess I need to Let me just... yeah. Oh well. Okay, this is so ugly, but just bring this. Okay, for in order to use that kind of image, I think you could use a cop2 network with the file option. Then based on the number of colors, maybe you wanna quantize it. Maybe you could first make it I don't know, black and white. How do I do that? Forgot. Mask. Sequence. Proxy. I actually don't know much about the cops, so... well, obviously it doesn't really have to be that big. Make it half size. And after you have cop, you get an image which is still a bit too big. Make it 1x4. Okay, it's good. Now we need to think about how we can transfer this image to here. Now if I just use the UV, that's gonna be a problem, as you can see from the texture map, so somehow you need to project it. I guess there are many ways to project this. One is to use a what was it called? Triplanar. Yeah, triplanar is the one that I was looking for, but I'm not sure if this could be used. Oh, it actually makes you able to pick the image, so let's try to pick it. And it says this is for the displacement. I actually want to use it for a color, so use this mask. Okay, somehow the map has been transferred to the crayfish, but I'm not sure if this is the mapping you are looking for, so it's I mean, if you want to use the UV, then, I mean, that's the way to go, but in this case UV doesn't really work because this is so messy, because it's the scan object, so I'm gonna just use this one instead. Attribute fill, node attribute, adjust by color. Everybody has some ideas. Let me try all. Attribute fill. It's the first time I use this. Okay, how do I use this? Interesting. Attribute. Huh. What's this for? butter and knife. Low-level node that can solve combinatorial version of some partial difference equations in an edge connected point cloud. So it will gather the matched attribute, I guess. In those cases, does it have to be like an integer or string? Not sure. Let's see. The attribute that I'm looking for is color, I guess. The attribute to match. Wait a minute. What's this for? I don't know how to use this. I am not sure how to use this. Point cloud with edge connectivity to run. Okay, so I do need to have a point cloud. Input geometry with updated attribute values. Modify. Written values depend on the selected mode. Okay. Attribute to match. CD Poisson solve. Okay. Sorry, but I need to look into this later. I don't really know how to use that one. Attribute adjust by color. Attribute adjust by color. Okay, well. What's this? What does this do? The attribute adjust color provides an interactive vary vector type attribute values that represent RGB color data, reducing the need to create FOP networks for write vex code. It allows modification by uniform colors. Ring colors can be generated fully randomly. Interesting. And what does it do? Does it always add? Okay. Well, so how am I supposed to use this? I can see that I can use this to adjust the colors, but interesting. Interesting, but what I want is just quantize this color with, I don't know, a bunch of integers or so on. That's pretty much it. So I guess I could use, I don't know, cluster instead, based on the color. Cluster attribute dd number of clusters, could be a number of colors, so I have 1 2 3 4. And do I get those clusters? I don't think so. I don't think so. Nope, doesn't work. Okay, well, you guys have a lot of ideas, and I am sorry I don't really know all of them. Pattern type? Pattern type? What does it do? Please let me know what these supposed to do. Pattern type. I don't have it. Attribute fill after group expression. What I need is just transferring this color into a integer map, integer color, and that's it. Attribute adjust by color has pattern type. Attribute adjust by color. Let me see. Attribute adjust color. This one? Nope. Post process. Nope. Pattern type? Where is that? I don't see it. Look, search for it. Okay. It's under a adjustment value. Adjustment value. Okay, here it is. But color map here. Okay, so you so instead of using this, you're saying to use this. I see. Okay, well, I guess it is using UV after all, so it's creating a really dirty image. That's what I wanted to avoid, but I guess it's the same with the attribute map as well. So these type of mapping is what I want to avoid. What I wanted is just use any kind of mask into a quantized numbers like integers from 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. That's all I want, but I don't think this will do the job here. Instead of using UVP, this might do, but okay, well, this is another mapping which could be interesting. Well, although the mapping is not really important here. I mean, if you want to use UV, you gotta use different geometry for sure. So in those cases, you could use those, I don't know, attribute adjust color or attribute map node for sure, based on UV. But if you don't have a clean UV, then you gotta use something else. But the things that I want to do here is not those mapping stuff, but how I can quantize the color value into an integer, a unique value. That's what I would like to try out. So that's what I want to do, and in order to do that, I need to find a way. And what will be the best way to do? Okay, from based on the color value, I could, let's say, calculate the color distance from some random value. So which doesn't really, okay, it's not a good idea. Okay, let me give something like this. So I'm gonna create a scalar value based on the color vector. But instead of just adding one by one, I'm going to multiply 10 to y and multiply 100 to z. That way you'll get some unique numbers. And then now what I want to do is to see how it looks like, first of all. Alright. Now that I have these numbers, how do I use this? Nah. Okay, instead of doing this, I am going to convert the color into HSL, HSV, and which gives you a hue, saturations, and value. Value will be brightness. And based on those values, I think I could quantize the value. Right. Now, hue is changing the color, but in my case, I guess I could use V, which could be considered as brightness. So let's look at the brightness value. So it goes from 0 to 1, and you have somewhere in between. Now, what you want to do next is to get those 4 colors out of these points information. So you're gonna kind of have to get the average, because this is all different. So, oh well, this is still hard. Well, let me try. Enumerate node. Let me see. I haven't used this. Wow. Interesting. This could be the one. Let me see. This node sets an attribute on each point or primitive select groups sequentially. For example, it would set attribute to first point as a group 0, second point as a group 1. This difference from the built-in point primitive number because this node only sets the attribute for points primitives in the selected group. Seems like you need to have a group, but the name is this can be. But it has to have an integer value. So yeah, it's a bit hard to use because that's the one we need. I see. But yeah, this kind of give me some idea somehow. Let's see. First of all, I could convert this into an integer first of all by multiplying this by, I don't know, 10. Calculate the floor. See what happens. So you get a value in between 0 to 1. Right. Now connect this here. Use for a point, an attribute B, type integer. And what does it give you? So it gives you a order somehow. Wait, no. Gives some unique numbers to each of the values, which I don't really need. Okay. Maybe this is not useful. I will. Okay. Well. If I multiply it by 4, it gives you in total 4 numbers. I mean, no, 5 numbers. So multiply by 3 gives in total 3 numbers, which is related to B, but okay, so this is okay. Yeah, I guess I could use this method dividing by the number of colors that I have, but there is some how do I say, bias here, because division is done linearly, but the color brightness is not really linear, especially the value between this purple and blue. So it doesn't really work that much. So what I kind of need is Maybe I can multiply it by 100. And count the numbers which shares the same numbers. Maybe 100 is a bit too big, so make it 10. And then round these number up to 4. And that doesn't sound smart as well. Okay. Okay. Getting harder. Adjust color attributes must be used in 2 nodes. One for the texture, one is the color map, and the another is the mask, which you already have and apply screen mode. Adjust color must be used in 2 nodes. One for the texture, which is the color map, and one other for the mask, which you already have. Okay. Wait, I thought you wanted to use the texture for the masking, but it's not what you wanted. You just wanted to use this texture together with the mask, which has been already created. Okay, I get it. I get it now. I thought you wanted to use the texture for a mask. Okay, those case, I mean, those case, yeah, you could. Guess you could use it with the mask, I guess. So this is for the texture, but so meaning you want to use this somewhere around here instead of just changing the color like this. Change the color based on this. I see. In those cases, the mask is just a single value. So, and this is the 2D map. So it actually has to be a linear color map, something like this, color palette like this, I guess. Okay, so I wanted to use this. Okay, so okay, so I guess I noticed it correctly. You wanted to use this as a mask. Okay. Okay. Sure. Yeah, that's what I was assuming. So maybe going back to the COP network, there might be a way to quantize it. Maybe I could use this. And I think there was the way to make this black and white. Pixel, color, hue, mono. Okay, mono should be the one. Alright, make it grayscale. then quantize. Now I do see some quantizing happening here. Effect amount, mask input, frame sequence. Okay, that looks fine. I mean, it's not yet equal to 4, but better than before. Alright. Sounds good. And going back here. I think it's not being updated. Although, by using this one, am I able to use this for this? Doesn't really look like so. Okay, in order to use the COP network for a color, I guess there were a way to do that. Forgot how. If anybody know how to read the COP network through a channel, let me know. I think there is a way, but I forgot. OP? Nope. What's the way? Can't really remember. Let's see. Something like this. I guess this could work. Let's see. Be full. This doesn't have an out. Alright, it's not really working. Or is it working? Not sure. Let me try with this name here. Nope, I don't think it's working. I don't know. Well, let's just try with these after all. Just importing the original mask image here like that. then try to, quantize it. It's pretty much the same. You just get the brightness like this, and if you replace the color with the brightness, you just get the black and white grayscale. Now I guess it's easier to see without the texture at this moment, so let's delete the texture temporarily. Like that. Alright. And you could quantize the brightness by, first of all, dividing it by 0.1, for example, then make it integer. After that, you could again multiply by 0.1. And then make it as a color. Okay, so you have a range of 10 in this case. Where did it go? Yeah, these colors. Right? So you're supposed, well, maybe, yeah, you're supposed to have 10 range, or 11 in this case, including 0 to 1. Right. So might be easier to see with these. Now what you could do next is to count up all those numbers together. Count up the values which shares the same value from 0 to 1. Now in those cases, I think it makes sense to make it as an integer. So I'll make it as an integer like that. So in order to count these numbers which shares the same attributes, what you could do is you could create another attribute Wrangle. Let's make it as a detail. Then you know how many integers are there, which is in between 0 to 10. I think it was like that, right? Yeah. Then you want to look for the number of points which shares the same attributes. So int pts find attribute val count 0 point b I, and you get the count number. And then let's set the detail attribute to see how many numbers you get for each value. Just to check. Alright. So you do have a bunch of numbers actually. You got tons of values at 10, a little bit more on 0, but all the rest, it's pretty much the same. Not as I expected, does it? So the 10 means these white area, I think. And the 0 means those black areas, and all the rest is those blurred images, blurred areas. So this doesn't give me a good information. Let's try to make the range a bit lower or larger. If I make this larger, you get more quantize, as you can see. This might just work. And this might just be okay. As a pattern, as a masking pattern. Probably. In those case, how many numbers do I have? In total, you have 3. Okay. So I could promote the maximum number of mask by getting the B to detail, get the maximum, change this to count, mask count, or max B, which is equal to 2, so 2 plus 1, you have 3 colors. This one, and this one. Which is, and less number you have, more quantized number. I mean, the way you do this here is kind of a linear, so I don't know if this is the good way to do, but at least this will gives you some masking information for sure. And I guess I don't really like to use float number as a parameter. I rather want to use the integer as a parameter, so let's do that instead. I rather want to directly choose how many quantized numbers I have here, which is more understandable. So instead of using f, I would how do I use that? Instead of using f, f will be calculated as 1 divided by I. Okay, and for CD, I'll just divide it by I. And there you could specify number of numbers, maps or mask. If I say 1, you have 2, so that's not really a good number, so I will say -1. Okay, so if I say 2, you have 2 mask, 3, you have 3 mask, and so on. Okay, this will make more sense, I guess. So this is out of color. I have just transferred. So first of all, I have imported the textures. as a map using triplanar displays. Instead of using something like attribute adjust color or attribute map, if you have UV on, if you have a clean UV on top of the geometry, you should be able to use these instead of this one. But since this UV is pretty messy, pretty dirty, I'm instead using this one. And then just get the brightness value to quantize the value to 0 to the number of mask you specify. Okay, then after that you could just use that as a mask information. Now actually I shouldn't make it here, but where should I do this? Can I do this to these points? I don't know. I don't know if this will work with the triplanar. I don't think so. Nope. It has to be used with the mesh. So probably gonna have to be here. Now anyway, I need to transfer this mask information to a primitive in some other ways. So what will be the better way to do that? Currently there are no similar attribute that shares the same values, so instead of doing that, I am going to use the XYZ distance to search for the closest matching value. Using the pos, which is the center of the primitive. Okay, to get the primitive NUV, and then what did I want it to get? I wanted to get the mask information, which is this B. I'm gonna rename this to mask. And mask is equal to prim UV mask prim UV. Alright. Then place the mask like that. Alright. Should be able to get a mask transferred. Then let's see if this is gonna work. Changed it to switch one and see how it goes. So, is it corresponding to the mask that's been created here? So you have something like these masks, black here, gray here, white here. Is it corresponding to the color? I guess so. So the black part was gonna be red, the white part become blue, gray part become green. So looks correct. So that's another way to, I mean, not the perfect weight, for sure, but one of the way I could transfer the texture into a mask information somehow. Okay. Now, I think it's a good time to stop the live stream. Sorry for getting so long to finish this. But I guess it's a good time to finish it. And I think it's time for me to go to sleep now. It's around 4 a.m. in Japan time, so yeah. But I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you very much for all the comments, all the feedbacks, and all the new node that you guys showed me. That's also great. I'm gonna watch back the archive and try to learn these nodes that you guys showed me. It's really great to know all these. Okay, so I guess that's pretty much it. I'm gonna make this back to 1 and gonna make it as one of the new parameters for switch. Okay, and this one as well. This is, well, okay, I'll just keep this as 0. Okay, all good. Okay, so as always, I am going to upload the file that I've created on the live stream, which is this file, to a GitHub, which you can download the file from the video description page. I'm gonna paste the page URL to the video description page. I'm also going to upload the files to the Patreon of myself, so you could also download from there as well. But it's all free. And the live stream is going to be recorded as an archive, so you can rewatch it later as well. Everything is public. I think I am also going to include the GLB file because this is license free, so it says it's also free to redistribute. So just gonna include this mesh as well, which I showed you that you can download all sorts of model 3D scan models from this Sketchfab link, which is really cool. It's all shown in both in Japanese and English, so you would know what these are. You have like more than 1,000 models can be downloaded from here. Pretty cool. Okie dokie, so that's pretty much it. Thank you very much, and I'm gonna upload the file as soon as I finish this live stream, and hope you enjoy the live, and thank you very much for joining. As always, I really appreciate it. And see you sometime next week. Good night, and have a good day. Arigatou gozaimasu. I haven't decided what will be the next topic, but I'm currently implementing the wave function collapse in Houdini using Vex, instead of using Python. That could be a topic, but I'm still undergoing with the implementation, so it might take some time. So the next week's topic might be something different, but hopefully something interesting. Okay, good night.